for this morning. I hope all of us are seeing his face.
Yes.
It's our brother, our mentor, our teacher, who has been based in Canada, Professor Ngadi. And in brief, I have his short bio. He's a fellow of the Canadian Society for Bioengineering. And he has stayed quite a lot in several universities in overseas, Laval University, Quebec University, University of Georgia, and is also a professional member of the International Society for Bioengineering, American Society of Agricultural and Bioengineers, and Institute of Food Technologists. Professor Ngadi's research interest is to understand how product and process interrelate, looking to quality, safety of foods. Is published well a lot of mathematical modeling, optimization, transport system, food properties, and several other biofuels and bioproducts. He has published well over 200 publications, and he has several inventions. He has also supervised over 30 graduate students. When I look at his research gate, he's scoring almost 40 point something now, and is well cited, more than 4,000 citations to his credits. I want to welcome Professor Ngadi, and I want him to start to present his lecture. Thank you very much. Professor Ngadi, over to you.
All right, thank you, Professor Sani. It's a real pleasure for me to be with you and to join the NIFST. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we are seeing your slide. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, okay. Again, let me register my appreciation to NIFST. It's always, I'm always enthusiastic to be part of NIFST. I've known a number of people that we have developed very close relationship over the years. And each time that I have the opportunity to join NIFST, I always take the opportunity. So when I received the invitation to join you on this webinar, I quickly said yes, in spite of the short notice. And I want to congratulate the NIFST again, the NIFST executive, and the people that are leading the institute for organizing this, staying ahead of COVID-19, and specifically focusing on COVID, on robotic food processing. Now, this is quite interesting that we will all be using this technology, this platform, for a conference like this. And I think that underlines the importance of technology and what technology can do, and what we can do when technology is applied correctly. So the world is changing. There's no doubt about that. It's hard for us to imagine what last year was. It's completely different. All of us in our little corners and dealing obviously with the pandemic the world is dealing with right now. So the world is changing, and certainly so are we. We are all in this together, and we would have to find a way to optimize the times and the seasons that we are all involved in. When you look at the food or the agri-food industry worldwide, a number of things are happening. Now, of course, there is the population increase. We are heading close to 10 billion people in the world by 2015. Then also there is the issue related to urbanization. There will be close to 70% of people living in urban areas that would more and more depend on the rural areas for their food production, their economies that I imagine that will become increasingly important in the next few years. Then, of course, we would have to worry and deal with the protein, where meat would come from. There is going to be a large and increased demand for protein. And then, of course, also for water and other resources that, that we would need to produce and to keep up with the increasing population. So overall, the agricultural productivity would have to increase in terms of to meet those demands for food, fiber, and fuel. No, so then when you look at the current system that we have now, we very quickly realize that we do not have what it takes to support the need of the growing population and to produce food in a sustainable way. So we would have to think about the 800 million undernourished people and the 2 billion people that would be considered either deficient in micronutrients or overnutrition issues, dealing with overnutrition such as overweight and obesity. So the current food production then that we have now would have to change, would have to be adjusted in order to deal with these problems. Now, and on top of that, we have the pandemic. So already you have a food system that is struggling to be sustainable and to meet pace with the changing needs. And then, of course, now we have to deal with the pandemic. So the question then is, who feeds the world in an epidemic situation? And then many of you and many of us would have to wear masks, face masks. And then in some cases, there are issues with distribution, shelves are empty. And then, of course, if it was in here in Canada, we would have to deal with lineups in the groceries and in the shopping malls in order to get our basic needs. Now, I'm talking about that. The statistics shows that there are about roughly 4.7 million people who have been infected, or at least confirmed. 25%, roughly 25% of that would be in the United States. And I think, fortunately, the numbers are much lower and subdued in Nigeria, countries like Nigeria and other African countries. But nonetheless, we are now dealing with a rapid increase in the infections, and there are questions now about flattening the curves, keeping social distancing so that we would be able to handle the increase of this pandemic. So now the issue is that the lockdowns and of course hoping the hope is that this lockdown would slow that curve and then slow the increase of the infections. But they have not really done much in terms of food. They have decreased demands for durable goods for sure, but of course the demand for food and the need for food, as a matter of fact, has remained high. And so the situation that we have then is that COVID-19 will definitely amplify the risk for a hike in food prices, and then of course, which potentially can trigger crisis in many countries, particularly developing countries. So if you look at the statistics where we are right now in terms of the pandemic, we know that there will be impact, significant impact in world economies. For instance, in the US, about 50 million jobs are now considered to be vulnerable in the short term, people losing their jobs, and then people not having what it takes to keep up with the situation. Now, the good news about this is that primary agriculture, the impact on primary agriculture and other sectors like forestry, mining, and so on, is relatively mute. It's not as significant as other sectors. So that's good news from that point of view. But then if you look at the numbers also, you find that the processing, food processing, food services actually would be in the upper range of impact due to COVID-19. So accommodation services, food services would definitely be significantly impacted by COVID-19. Now, if we drill into that and look at where this impact will definitely happen, then food services, 46% of those vulnerable jobs, at least this is a US statistics, but it is reasonably representative of what you would expect in other economies. So about that 46% would be vulnerable, and that will be coming from food services, the sector that you and I are dealing with, and that in itself is important. And that means that the way food is produced, the way food is consumed, will significantly be impacted in the next coming few years. And then on top of that, then also the consensus is that there will be worsening of hunger, again, particularly in developing countries. And of course, it's expected, and in countries such as Nigeria, we would certainly expect that there will be hardship, there will be problems. So what we are really looking at is a situation where you've got an economic problem and a social problem, and then on top of that, of course, the food problem. Now, very specifically, we know that COVID-19 would change, has actually changed the way people would eat their food, the way they would shop, the way they would think about food. There will be issues related to new product development and packaging, and then there will be disruptions in the food supply chains. So there is going to be a different landscape when you think about food, when you think about production of food, and that comes that comes directly to the sector that you and I are operating, and we should really think about how to deal with that problem. Now, the food industry is an interesting sector. When we look at the production of food, it's not really about the production only of food, but then there is the distribution of food, there is the processing of food, and then of course there is the consumption of food. So that brings it very down to an area that has been of interest personally to me for several years, the food value chain. So when we look at the food value chain from the farm all the way to the kitchen, and then looking at the different players that are involved in this value chain, now we see that the food processing sector in particular, you would have, tends to use a lot of people, a lot of labor, a lot of people moving around, a lot of handling of very sensitive materials. And then, of course, that comes with a lot of risk. And then both to people that are working directly, people that are working in these processing facilities, but also for the people that would consume the food. So, of course, when there is a problem in the food sector, then of course it's a population problem. So the question then is, how do we maintain productivity? How do we maintain efficiency, considering the landscape that we know as the food processing sector? For instance, it's going to be difficult for us to think about social distancing in a typical food plant, where you have people that are almost standing shoulder to shoulder, and then you have people that are handling very delicate food materials. How do we maintain that? And how do we make sure that food is produced in a safe way and food, the quality and safety of food is maintained? In order to answer that question, let's take a little bit step backwards and just look at what happens when we think about the future of food. Because the processing as we know it is going to change. Change is coming your way. Change is coming our way. And it is very important for us to appreciate that change and be able to deal with it and actually manage that change. Now, when we look at food and the processing of food and the future of it, there are many variables that are related. You're thinking about the nutrition and health. Of course, there is the technology, innovations, there is environmental issues, and demographics, and efficiencies, and so on. But the reason why I put up this slide, which has come from the World Economic Forum, and I don't think you will see it very well, but the largest countries, or the countries that to watch out for in the next few years, particularly in the next 10 years, is really not, it will be the United States, India, China, and Nigeria. So what happens in Nigeria can actually have a huge impact in the world's food production system. And I think that is significant. That's a huge challenge for institutes and organizations like NIFST, that we would have to step up to deal with how to produce food in the future, in the next coming decade, and then to produce that effectively, looking at the connectivities that we know of in the food value chain. And while we're still thinking about that, I'm going to also step aside a little bit and then talk to you about industrial revolution and how this has happened in the later half of the 18th centuries, and how technology has actually transformed the rural economy, the agrarian economy, in countries like Europe, of course, and the Americas. So mechanization has been the core of food production historically. When I teach my food engineering course, and I said to my students, and sometime I guess someone is going to be able to write this as a book. I said, when the caveman discovered fire and the handling of fire, he actually became a human being. Now, because it is actually the processing of food that differentiates humans from animals, because then we can handle fire, we can handle processing of food and the transformation of food. And that comes essentially by technology, by interfacing interfacing the hand with some sort of technology. So we do know that there has been the first industrial revolution, which was based mostly on mechanization, industry, power, the introduction of power, steam power, water power. And then you have the second industrial revolution, which propelled the commercialization, commercial manufacturing of products, mass production of products. And then, and some would say that we are right now in digital age, the third industrial revolution, which has to, of course, has to use mostly computer and automation. And then there is the other part of it, and that is the fourth industrial revolution, which obviously is coming your way. And that is going to change the game when it comes to food processing. And that would be quite significant for the way we produce food, the way we handle food, the way that food is food and waste is basically handled. And this is not completely new because when you look at the thinking, how people have envisioned the food processing, there has been quite a number of people that have envisioned new production of food that we are seeing now, very visionary food production over the years. So there has to be then a radical innovation of the food value chain if we must feed the growing population and if we must be able to deal with upsets such as that we are right now in COVID-19. And the fourth industrial technology, industrial revolution technologies, and of course, I'm thinking of artificial intelligence, the computer vision, robotics, will be up and center, front and center in dealing with these demands, in dealing with future demands and sustainable food supply. So artificial intelligence in itself is concerned with building smart and intelligent machines that are capable of performing tasks which traditionally we would ascribe to humans. And it typically would involve using techniques like neural networks, deep learning, and then combining all of that with machine vision. There is, over the last few years, has been a huge increase in investments around artificial intelligence, that people are calling that now the new frontier. And so in 2016, for instance, $26 billion to $39 billion investment in artificial intelligence, and that is obviously increasing as well. And that cuts across all areas of the value chain, all areas of the value chain, from production to manufacturing to distribution, and then of course to consumption of food. So that is going to be significant and change the way that food is produced. There are different components of artificial intelligence, and I just want to suggest to you the 5 basic components of that. Now, some having to do with machine learning, such as deep learning, speech recognition, computer vision, and then of course, language processing and robotics. Now, in my practice, I do a lot of computer vision, and that in itself is going to be one of the areas where you're going to find a lot of impact with artificial intelligence. So computer vision deals with trying to mimic our human visual system, looking at patterns, understanding patterns, recognizing patterns, combining that with machine learning, and then also employing techniques such as line detection techniques, feature extraction, segmentations, and then, of course, looking at features and how we can track features. AI, artificial intelligence, has been used in different areas, in healthcare, using it in robot-assisted surgeries, in drug discoveries. And of course, there is the data analytics, which is becoming quite popular across the board. It has also been used in automobile. You may have heard of autonomous vehicles that are in some places coming on the streets. And then, of course, it has also been used widely in agriculture, looking at detecting diseases and pests, robotic harvesting, weed control, monitoring soil health, and then using computer vision to analyze crops and growth of crops. Now, in the food processing sector, artificial intelligence is used quite very widely. It's used to automate the processing of food, handling hygiene issues, quality issues, sorting issues, and again, increasingly using that to meet some of the very specific consumer demands, some of the demands that we're seeing from consumers. The other aspect that AI is used in the food industry would be to, in terms of logistics and supply chain management, real-time or on-time supply of goods. And that is quite important in the food industry, where we would have to make sure that the food is delivered on time and a particular condition, having to find out where we will be able to supply food. We have a project that I was leading, where we were talking to some farmers. Some farmers would have to walk hours to the farm or to the market, and only to find out that their product is no longer needed. So the question is, how do we connect the farmers and the consumer, or the farmers and the processors, and how do you make sure that the farmer produces at the rates that the demand or the consumer is demanding or the processor is demanding? Artificial intelligence has been used and can be used to do that. Now, I have for several years worked on food quality. How do we measure crispness or crunchiness of food materials? Of course, artificial intelligence has been used and can be used to optimize food quality, optimize relationship between processing and quality of food, and give the processor a better control of how that food is produced. So whether we are talking of harvesting, packaging, sorting and grading, or in general quality control, artificial intelligence has been used severally in the food sector. Now, the other exciting application of artificial intelligence, which I'm so glad to be involved in, is looking at nutrition, the interface between diet and nutrition, and how we can design an app that will allow consumers to assess the nutritional content of a particular product, or to look at their diet diversity and understand what that would be, or what would be the implication of that to their diet. So classification of food, identification of food, classifying that food into different nutritional groups and allowing people to make that selection would be a fantastic, appropriate application of AI in the food sector. One of the other applications that I have been quite fortunate to be involved in, for which we got a patent on quite recently, is how we can look at eggs and how we can grade the eggs, and then look at the fertility of eggs, which before now was practically impossible to do. But artificial intelligence and machine vision allows us to do that, where we can take a look at the egg and then determine what the quality would be, whether it is fertile or non-fertile, and also to determine what the sex of the chicks would be before they are hatched, which I think is a land-breaking achievement. Now, in the case of COVID-19, there are new questions that are coming up. How do we maintain compliance? How do we make sure that the workers are safe in the food processing plants? Now, with artificial intelligence, there has been a work that was done in China where you will be able to recognize faces, recognize whether they are applying the rule the way they should, or if they were wearing, for instance, face masks properly, or whether they are wearing hats properly. And this is something that would have been almost impossible to do in a food processing plant without artificial intelligence. Now, the other discussion is that if you are having people come into a large area where potentially there could be spread of disease, whether they are showing the symptoms or not, is there a way that we can recognize people who have the symptoms or people who have the disease, and then be able to isolate them before they spread that disease to others? And this is an interesting application of artificial intelligence. There are other applications, all the way from predicting recipes from images, making recommendations based on for the packaging, new product development, cleaning systems, and then of course the waste reduction and optimizing the supply chain. Let me just talk a little bit about new product development and how that relates to artificial intelligence. Now, we do know that right now there is changing, there is the changes in the demand for certain foods. And that is going to increase either during this pandemic or right after the pandemic. Now, certain food products would be desired, and how do we produce that? That will be very specific to certain consumers. There are different consumers that will be looking for very specific foods, either from the point of view of safety or just simply from taste. Now, artificial intelligence will allow us to be able to customize these products, which otherwise would have been very difficult to do, where if you would have to produce on a very large scale for different people. So what I have shown on this slide would be the interplay between artificial intelligence and computer vision, where within the industry, you've got certain areas that would have to be driven by artificial intelligence, and then certain areas that would have to be driven by computer vision. And to give you an example, I have been working for more than 10 years now on hyperspectral imaging. And then in terms of hyperspectral imaging, that would be a combination of computer vision and spectroscopy. And then when you have this combination of those two technologies, and we are able to determine the quality of food. So in a processing plant or on a processing floor, you can tell if there is a contamination on the food. You can tell what would be the quality level of a food product. And when that determination is made, then we can apply some sort of artificial intelligence to take decisions what to do. Now, of course, there are technologies around that, but there is this very close interrelationship between computer vision and artificial intelligence. And then, of course, there is the other aspect where we would have to deal with big data, collection of data, and then making decisions based on those on data analytics. But in any case, there is that connection that we would have to understand and deal with. I'm looking at my time, so I would have to go a little bit faster. But the artificial intelligence adoption across the value chain. Now, if you look at this very closely, and I can speak a little bit more on this. Now, and if you consider the food industry, it becomes quite obvious that especially for operations that require or that are labor intense, which we know that is the case in food processing, then there is a potential for application of artificial intelligence. And that is great. So remember when I was showing where you've got this whole, the sectors that would be affected, most affected by COVID. And then I said, of course, the food service and then the accommodation sector would be affected by COVID. Now, that sector also has that potential for application and then, of course, adoption of artificial intelligence. So I think that combination is quite powerful. And then, again, the artificial intelligence has this possibility, this capacity to create value in those areas where you've got the 4 Ps, the product or the project, the product, to promote and to provide. So it has the capacity to add value in providing very specific benefits, promoting some very specific benefits, producing that, and then of course also for projects. So the retail stores, personalized tips and suggestions, offering immediate assistance and virtual agent, automate in-store checkout, for instance, for food, and also when you look at optimizing pricing, personalizing promotion for food, and then of course, and also for display in store. So there are different areas that artificial intelligence can add value. The impact of artificial intelligence would be huge in changing the shape of demand, looking for alternative proteins, as I said before, sensing technologies, food safety, quality, and traceability, nutrigenetics, which is getting quite popular for personalized nutrition, big data and advanced analytics for insurance, promoting value chain linkages, connecting linkages, and understanding interactions between linkages, the Internet of Things, the Internet particularly of supply chain transparency and traceability, and creating effective production systems would be really crucial in the application of artificial intelligence in the food industry. Now, there are bottlenecks that we would have to deal with. And some of these would be the lack of quality data, lack of data that we would need for the big data analytics, lack of expertise, lack of technology and research, Now, there is also the high cost of bandwidth. In places like Nigeria, we know that it is difficult to have the bandwidth in some places. And then when you have that bandwidth, the cost of that bandwidth can be discouraging. And then there is the low awareness of artificial intelligence in processing, in food processing, and then of the problems that are associated with integrating artificial intelligence in the operation, in the typical operation that we know. I thought that I should take a moment and just reflect on what would be the implication of this in a Nigerian situation, in Nigerian food processing sector. We need to contribute. We know that the development of artificial intelligence is important. The key would be the young professionals. And as a group, we need to be thinking of the next generation of professionals. Some of us are probably getting ready to hand over the baton to young professionals. And it is very crucial for us to invest in building a generation of young professionals that have expertise in machine vision, artificial intelligence. Now, I have noticed in my personal experience that China is leading, and most people that come to my lab, China is investing very heavily in this sector. Places like Iran also investing very heavily in this sector. India is coming, and it is really important for Nigeria and the food processing sector in Nigeria to really think about this. And I don't think that has to be done alone. So there will be need to partner with local and foreign organizations to facilitate this development of technologies or AI-enabled technologies in the food processing sector in Nigeria. Universities and research institutes would have to be involved to drive this technology. And then we would have to look for government support as well, and to develop a national strategy for the food sector. And again, I congratulate NIFST for thinking about this, thinking about robotics in food processing. I think that is really a good start, and that should be encouraged. And then looking at ways to encourage again this growth in that sector. I have a few conclusion remarks to make. There are many uses of artificial intelligence in the food industry, both already being used and then potential. There are some new startups, technology startups that are building. I'm pleased that some of the technologies that has been developed in my lab is moving on to commercialization and is being used, is being developed based on machine vision and artificial intelligence. So it is there, and it's going to continue to be there. Now, if you look at historically, the food industry, and I'm talking of modern food industry, has actually been based on technology. We know several years ago that there is no way we would be feeding 9 billion people with whole and knife. That is not going to happen. And there's no way that we're going to feed that teeming population with just simply cooking in your kitchen. That is not going to happen. So the food industry has benefited tremendously, I would add, from technology. The future is automated. And we need to get that very clear. The future is automated. And the next generation of food processors would rely heavily on emerging technologies such as AI in order to be competitive. And that's where we would have to think about Nigeria. Now, the thing with it is that if we are going to be producing food, we would have to do that effectively, and we would have to use the tools, the right kind of tools that will be required to meet the demand and the need. I always have told my students that, you know, the Stone Age did not end because all of a sudden there was lack of stone. No. So people did not abandon the Stone Age because they couldn't find any more stone around. But the Stone Age ended because it was difficult, it was impossible to continue to meet the demand and the need with the technology that they had at that point. And that meant that there was need to change that. And that would be my suggestion, that countries that fail to see the need for the new technologies, countries that fail to apply the new technologies would be lagging behind. And there is another thing there that COVID-19 has told us or has taught us, is that there is going to be increasingly the need for countries to be reasonably self-reliant. You cannot continue to depend on foreign countries to provide the vital needs such as food that you need. I think that it is totally inappropriate to have a country of about close to 180 million people depending on other countries to supply some of the staples that we would normally need. So you would have to think about how to produce this. You would have to think about how to produce locally. Now, thinking locally and then acting, or thinking globally and acting locally. But in the food processing sector, it's going to be important for us to be able to have the capacity to produce food at the level of the demand that the country needs. And we would have to have the right tools. We would have to have the right technologies. And artificial intelligence would be in that order of things. Now, the other thing that I want to add, and I want to end this with a good news, and that is what I see from my practice and my experience. I think that artificial intelligence or some of these emerging technologies can be actually a good leveler. So, and what I mean by that is that it provides a level field where the big players can actually, the small players can actually compete with the big players. So the implication of that is that developing countries or even small companies can actually show tremendous strength in competing using some of the AI technologies, emerging AI technologies. Now, countries like Nigeria do not have to go step 1 and step 2. I always get frustrated when I hear or when I read about people that come and say, well, you know, since you have not been able to use this, then you have to build on a from another. Look at what happened in the communication sector. And that is a good example where the adoption of cell phones at some point was in developing countries was about the same or even more than in developed countries. Now, of course, we can talk about the quality of that, the reception of that, MTN and grow and so on. But nonetheless, these emerging technologies provide the opportunity, the platform for the big players to compete with the small players, and the small players to compete with the big players, for the developed countries to compete with the developing countries, and vice versa, on a relatively same ground. So it is quite possible for us to envision certain sectors of the food processing but we would have to bring in and establish the capacity to do that, the will to do that. And I think that is where NIFST can contribute. I think that's where some of the universities where you have food processing, food science, nutrition, food engineering can contribute. And I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to think about that. I encourage you to be bold, to envision, to see the possibilities. And when that is done, I envision a landscape that can accommodate the level of sophistication that you will see anywhere in the world. So thank you for listening, and thank my thanks to NIFST and the leadership at NIFST for giving me this opportunity. It's always, as I said before, a real pleasure for me to be part of what you're doing. And I would like to thank Professor Sani, particularly a good friend of mine for several years, for asking me to do this. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Prof. We are very grateful for that. So I want to thank every one of us for this opportunity. And if you can stop sharing, then I will call on the next speaker.
That this is not.
Okay.
It's not my screen.
All right.
Add the books.
I want to welcome Blessing, who is the next speaker. And Blessing Onojede is a food safety and HSE expert, an ISO management system consultant, trainer, and auditor. She's actually the CEO of Improvement Focus Consultants. She's a conference speaker who has also featured in several platforms. A former National Publicity Secretary of NIFST and a former staff of Lacasera, SDS, and Coca-Cola Company. And she has conducted some audit work on behalf of some clients. And she is a graduate of food technology with an MBA in international business management. And I want to welcome Blessing to proceed to present our lecture. Thank you. Is Blessing still there? What? Hello?
From the back end, she's still here, but she has not unmuted herself.
Hello? Now. Dollar?
Yes, Prof.
I unmute Blessing. She says she cannot unmute herself.
Okay. Done.
Done.
Yes, sir.
And also, hello everybody.
You start your video now.
Okay.
You can share now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Dollar?
Yes, Prof. She's
Hello.
fine.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon.
There you go.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, my able National President, Professor Ngadi, dear professional colleagues, and every other guest that may be joining us for this webinar. It is a privilege to be here, to be able to make this presentation, and I really want to appreciate the leadership of NIFST. Thank you once again. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so let's go right into it. I believe you can see my screen now. I have been asked to speak on robotic food process and systems. How ready is Nigeria? Well, for some people, they might say, is that even a question? Isn't the answer obvious? Not so fast. So let's move ahead together and see how ready we are as a nation for robotic food systems. The last speaker had already talked a lot about AI, which could also be applicable in robotics. But so let's just move on. So we're going to start with robots. Really, what are robots? According to Encyclopedia Britannica, it says that a robot is any automatically operated machine that replaces human effort, though it may not resemble human beings in appearance or perform functions in a human-like manner. That's the definition given by Encyclopedia Britannica. So basically, they just perform what humans are supposed to do. And then robotics. Obviously, the word robotic was coined from the word robots. So what is robotics? In a layman's language, we say that robotics is the application, the use of robots. But according to Encyclopedia Britannica, again, it says is the design, construction, and use of machines, which are robots, to perform tasks done traditionally by human beings, in a nutshell. Then there is the issue of robots and automation. What is the difference? Is there confusion here? According to your dictionary, it says the definition of automation is the use of machines and technology to make processes run on their own without manpower. Okay. So, how did we get to the point of robots? Like Prof mentioned when he was doing his presentation, it started from Stone Age. From Stone Age, we are now talking about robots. Briefly, the history of robots in brief. The word robot was first coined by the Czech playwright Karel Čapek in 1920 in his play Rozum's Universal Robots, popularly known as RUR. That was where the word robot came from. And what that play was depicting was a mechanical men, that is robots, that were built to work in a factory assembly line, but they rebelled against their human masters. You know, people who like to watch sci-fi things, you know, you see there are lots of robots-related sci-fi films. So what Zesh was trying to portray, Čapek was trying to portray in his, what he portrayed really in that play was robots that were used to work in the assembly lines. And then if you're thinking forward, really, there are different fears about robots. The major fear being that they're going to take over people's jobs. So we're going to get to that point. That is obvious. But again, going by a lot of sci-fi movies, there are also fears that with the way they're going and artificial intelligence, which the last speaker talked about extensively, with artificial intelligence, these robots might also get to the point that they take over the entire universe, take over the earth from men. So that's robots for you. Again, how did it come about? This one was also by a Russian-born American science fiction writer. His name was Isaac Asimov. Of course, those are the real pictures you can see on the slide. Those are the real photographs. Okay, his name is Isaac Asimov. In his short play titled Roundabout, he mentioned robotics came. Generally, but in his own play, unlike Čapek's play, he was more optimistic. He portrayed robots as helpful servants of man and viewed robots as better, cleaner race. So I say to you now, we are talking about robots. Obviously, it's the future, it's way to go. It might take, how long is it going to take Nigeria? 10 years, 20, 100? I don't know. But some countries are already deploying the use of robots. So whichever way, what are your thoughts? Do you think that they'll really get to the point with artificial intelligence of taking over the earth from man? Or do you think that they're going to be we're going to be able to work together as pals? Well, that is not my own topic of interest for this presentation. So we just go on. Now, so but why robots in the food industry? I mean, we're doing good. We're doing okay. We had manual labors. People are there to do the work. So why robots again? Easy. Food lies in food processing. Food contamination. The thing for robots, one of the main reasons for robots in the food industry is due to food contamination. There's no gainsaying the fact that humans are carriers of food poisoning agents, pathogens, you know, and that's why they need for hand washing. When you get to industries, food manufacturing sectors, you find areas you have to wash your hands, observe basic hygiene practices before you can go in to handle the food. And then also the basic hygiene practices for you to be able to, before you enter, while you're working, if you go out and come back, all of those things are there. But in spite of that, there's still human errors. And then people just do not like to be told what to do. They don't like to, they just want to do what they want to do. They know the right things to do, but they're just not, even though some of them are trained over and over again. We find that a lot in the industry. And that's one of the reasons for food safety. But with the robots, you clean them up. You have them prepared to do what you want them to do. There is a procedure for them to, they don't go beyond where they're supposed to go and all of that. And then human interaction. Also, there's food contamination from raw materials or food products that a human has recently touched. Of course, we say in food safety, one of the major ways to keep food safe is to ensure that you separate raw foods from cooked foods. Because apparently, raw foods still contains microorganisms, which may include pathogens that have not been cooked, have not been treated. So we will not allow that to mix with the raw food, with the prepared food. There is bound to be transfer of cross-contamination. So like I said, in the food industry, people are taught these things, but they just want to do what they want to do. So the person who, for instance, just handled a bag of raw flour has to go and pick something from the conveyor, and it goes without going to wash his raw flour, and it goes to handle that and takes transfer. Or maybe you want to use a knife, a knife that was used to cut raw meat. You want to use it to cut a prepared product. Instead of washing it, clean it up properly, you just pick it, and there is bound to be cross-contamination. And then, okay, you must also have the issues of human hair, human skin, human nails. Okay, like we say in the food industry, you have to, before you get into the production in certain climes where people must keep beds, the idea you shouldn't keep beds, but in certain, due to religious reasons, they need to keep their beds. So we say, okay, you have to have something to cover your beds. You have to cover your hair properly. Somehow, I don't know how that works. You still see air flying around, people's nails and stuff. But with robots, you don't get all this kind of food contamination. And then another reason, again, is the high demand for lean manufacturing within the food industry. And I know that this is not just within the food industry. Lean manufacturing has been on for a long time. There's been this conversation about lean manufacturing for a very long time, not just in the food industry. And I think now, even with the COVID thing, there's more conversation about lean manufacturing, because the more people you keep, the more money you have to pay, the more maintenance you have to do and stuff like that. And really it's difficult managing people. So another reason for robots is lean manufacturing. Or you may say to a blessing, isn't it expensive to install robots, to have robots in the work environment? Is that cheaper than, in the long run it is. In the short term, it might seem, if you're budgeting it, if you're putting it into your budget a year, it might be difficult, it might look a lot, but in the long term. So, and another reason for robots in the food industry is because to mitigate workplace accident levels as much as possible. Now, this is very serious, very, very serious. Okay, for food process, like I said, I'm a food technologist, I'm a food safety expert. I'm going to limit it to food industry and food safety. But right now, this last point is talking about HSC, occupational health and safety, which is another area that I'm good at. So when we talk about HSC, manufacturers, why do you set up an organization? You set up an organization to produce safe and quality products. You've not set up an organization to kill people, to get people injured. So you have to be careful, because when people come into that organization, there is a way they come in and there is a way they're expected to go out. And if that doesn't happen, a lot of things can go wrong. So that's why when the multinationals are rating during audits, when we go for HSC audits, there are different ratings. You have the critical, you have the improvement, you have the minors, you have the major. Once an organization sees a major, it is serious. Not to talk about critical, because if you allow that to fester, it can ruin the reputation of the organization. If an employee comes within your organization and because there are no safety measures in place, they get injured, or worse still, they die, that organization can be ruined for life. There will be issues of litigations and stuff like that. So when you consider all of this, and then again, same thing with people. People would always be people. Those things happen not because in a lot of cases, especially with the multinationals, which I'm quite conversant with, it's not that those things, it's not like things are not put in place to mitigate against those injuries. People would just not want to inconvenience themselves. People would always look for shortcuts. So they look to their right, they look to their left, no manager is coming, no supervisor is coming, and let's just quickly touch that electrical stuff. We don't need to put on anything, any safety gadgets. How long is it going to take, especially in our client Nigeria? Let's just treat how long is it going to take. But in the bid to quickly do it, anything can go wrong. And so when organizations, especially the big wigs, when they consider this and like, we don't want to, we've come this far, we don't want to put our organization at risk. So maybe we just have to, and also if it's an organization who is trying to deal with occupational health and safety, they've been having issues and they've gotten to the point of critical. Maybe if they can afford this, they can think about for robots. Now, currently, robots in the food industry, it's existing a lot. We may not see a lot of them in Nigeria, but it already exists. So according to the International Federation of Robots, 240,000 units were sold worldwide in 2015. That was 8% increase in annual growth globally. Early uses of robots in food industry. Robots, when the use of robots started, again, I'll reiterate, robots are already in use in the food industry, not in Nigeria, of course, in developed countries. Okay, and that reminds me, the very first trip I made, the very first official trip I made when I joined the Coca-Cola company, I was overwhelmed. I was blown away when I went to one of the plants, actually the biggest, at Ipanema. I saw robots everywhere. I went into the floor, the packaging area. I saw robots this was in 2007. So I called back and I said to my manager, how come we don't have this in Nigeria? How come we don't have robots? It was so nice watching them. And she said to me, we know we can do that, but remember that there's poverty in the land. If we decide to go robots, all these families here, one person working has their nuclear family, and then they have supports, extended family that we're used to in Africa. So put together all those people. That's why in Africa, I think that is one of the reasons we're still slow, because of the poverty rate. It's not like we don't, because these multinationals, most of them that set up, that have these things working in developed countries, they can also establish it here. But our leaders are cautious. They are aware of the fact that there's poverty in the land, and we have to consider our people first. And that was the very sensible excuse that my manager gave me back then. And I think it's still relevant today. It makes a lot of sense. Okay, so when robotics started in food industry, it was basically for packaging and palletizing operations. That was the beginning of it. But it's gone way, way beyond that now. Now, excuse me. Excuse me. Approximately 40% of palletizing operations and 26% of food and beverage packaging lines are engaged in the use of robotics. Now, not only are robots used in the food industry, we know that when we talk about food safety in the food industry, we talk farm to fork. So it's not just about in the industry again, it's gone beyond that. I'm going to be showing us different areas where robots are being used in the food industry. Food industry manufacturers have reported a 25% increase in productivity since employing robotics when compared to the work done by humans. Now, the statistics was done was taken in 2015, I think. And we're now in 2020. So make your calculations. Obviously, there must have been an increase before COVID. Now, I'm going to take us to the various applications of robotics in the food industry. I'll start from the very beginning. There can't be any form of production without agriculture. Because if we're talking about, well, there can't be any form of food production without agriculture, because we are food people. We're talking food here. So for food to happen, something must have happened at the farm. So robots go way back to the farms. And in agriculture presently, and before I say that, let me put it out there that an agricultural robot is also known as agribots. So whenever you hear agribots, it's referring to robots in agriculture sector. So they're used for specific agricultural purposes, for harvesting stage, obviously, for monitoring the environment, for soil analysis. And then the last point really is very interesting to me, because it talks about you're able to use robots to gather data on the status of the crop within the external conditions to evaluate the best type of condition to cultivate for crops. So when the robots do these things, I mean, these are some of the things that humans cannot do. So obviously there's going to be greater yield in agriculture, and there is greater yield in agriculture. I'm not telling you things that are going to be happening in the future. I'm showing you things that are already happening in other parts of the world. Robotics in food manufacturing. According to robotic.org, a major advancement in robotic technology within the food processing has been the introduction of more advanced grippers. These grippers allow for quick but gentle handling of sensitive food products like fruit and vegetables. Okay, I'll explain that. Initially, remember I said that at the beginning, robots were used for basically palletizing, packaging, and palletizing. Now, there was a huge challenge at the beginning because food can be very sensitive. There is a way to handle foods. All foods are not the same. There are foods that if you don't handle properly, they will get out of form. They'll get out of form. We're not talking safety now, just they'll get out, or they can, and robots are using machines, they are hard. So imagine a robot gripping any form of veggie, that vegetable will be crushed out, out of form. So it took a while for robots that can handle vegetables to be developed. But now they are in existence. Now let's see robotics in food packaging and palletizing. According to BBC research, the food processing and packaging market will be valued around 31.5 billion by 2020. That is the year we're in right now, which shows the clear upward spiral the market is going. Furthermore, 94% of food packaging operators are using robotics already, according to a survey by the Association of Packaging and Processing Technologies. Still on robotics in packaging and palletizing. So these are the basic operations. They can be used for primary and secondary packaging, which is another improvement again, because obviously from my previous explanation, when they started, it was used basically for secondary packaging. Then you had that, but now they can be used to so this is so interesting. The most recent robot application within the cooking space is the robot chef Flippy, designed and developed by Miso Robotics and part funded by the Kali Group. Flippy is a robotic arm that flips and cooks burgers with ease and fries up to 80 baskets of food per hour. It monitors the food to ensure it's cooked and can clean up after itself. Isn't that amazing? It's just like a human being. Flippy does the entire cooking. Sorry, I tried to get a photo of Flippy. I didn't get it. There was a video which I tried to download it on, but I'll just tell you about Flippy. So Flippy is a robot, but he cooks. He does everything. It fries that burger. It can flip it. And then when it's done, it cleans up after itself. It doesn't wait. It's not like the robot is done and human being. So you can see that when you see things like this, it's really worrisome to think that what's going to happen to human employment in the near future. Here, this isn't Flippy, but this is a picture of another robot chef. Doesn't this look cute? I think it's so cute. And these robots would go ahead and do all the food preparation. Automation and development has started for cooking robots in homes as well. Now we're talking about robots cooking in the food industry, but also there are development of robots to cook in homes for those who usually have cooks. Some people don't cook in their homes, they employ cooks. So now there's even a threat to the chef, the home chef, because there are robots that do the cooking at home. Obviously, the modification will be different from the industrial one for obvious reasons. Now, robots in meat processing. I just wish we can get here really fast as a nation, because in the Street Food Safety Committee of the Nigerian Institute of Science and Technology, NIFST, there's been a lot of, and we have a project, part of what we try to do is to talk to butchers. Some of us go to butchers and try to tell them, keep clean and stuff like that. Well, COVID-19, everything that has a bad side has a good side, as well. I think that one of the good things that COVID-19 would do for us really is to reduce the work of the NIFST Street Food Safety Committee, because you don't want to imagine how much work it is when we go to the open market and you try to make people understand the simple use of nose mask is so inconveniencing. I'm not even surprised, because even in the big industries, when that simple nose mask, as soon as the supervisor turns, there's nobody to around, they take it off. So trying to get, but now that's what people are wearing everywhere, all over the place. And then there's really a huge issue from school, out of school, working. There's a huge issue about the way meat is handled in Nigeria. But you can see the photo on the screen, see how the robot is handling that meat very hygienically and in a very safe manner. And what can the robots do with the meat? They can cut it, they can sort it, and then they package it. Talking about dairy industry. So you can see we're going from sector to sector in the food industry. You see that in every sector almost, and this is not exhaustive really, this presentation is not exhaustive. So even in the milking of cows, the milking systems, milking systems were developed in Europe in the early 1990s. So it's not something that started now, and were introduced in the United States in the year 2000. Robotic milking is voluntary, allowing the cows to set their own milking schedules. I think this is really interesting. Just set it up, and when the cow is ready, they go ahead to do the milking. And I think that, of course, like a human, if I may say that, you do things when you're ready. I remember I was talking to NPS yesterday. I was talking about my slides, and I said, sometimes you just have to, you're not just in the mood to do something until you have that, you're in that frame of mind where you're ready to do it. So I think that's what happens here with the cows as well. They're able to set their schedule based on when they're ready for proper milking. And I think it would yield a lot of products and safety, better quality. Also in cheese processing, robots help with stirring cuts, slicing cheese, packaging. Robots can portion up to 12,000 cheese portions per hour. Isn't that amazing? Let's actually think about it. If humans were doing that, do you think
we have 5 minutes? Blessing.
Oh, really?
We have 5 minutes, yes.
Awesome. Do you think they'll be able to do that for that much time? Now, robots in food service. Robots perform a variety of kitchen tasks as well, mixing, chopping, cocktail, and all of that. And then robots in food delivery. Robots also now are used to deliver food when food is, that's a photograph there of a robot delivering food to a customer after the order has been made and it was prepared. Now, what are the advantages of robots in the food industry? Reduce requirements for intensive man labor, reduction in on-the-job injuries, the ability to perform operations that are highly undesirable for humans, increase in final product quality, the ability to perform operations that are very difficult to perform manually by humans, increases in productivity. Disadvantage is enhancement in flexibility, improvement in safety, and all of that. Now, my main topic is, how ready is Nigeria? Are we ready for this robotic evolution? For us to answer that question, I want us to look at the composition of the Nigerian businesses. The Nigerian business is comprised of these micro, small, and medium enterprises, and are usually not, they don't have the financial capacity to do that. And also, I'm rushing now, the culture of our people. Nigerians, naturally, we are sociable people, we like company. And also, even in a study of B2B and B2C organizations by Uzo and Adigwe 2016, it was evident how cultural norms impact business transactions in Nigeria. That is why you can go to a workplace, a very corporate work environment, to hear people speaking vernacular. And again, another thing to do with our culture, people prefer the one-on-one. Do you think Nigerians, I'm asking us now, because this question is for all of us, do you think Nigerians are ready for interacting with robots, a machine? Are people predisposed to transacting with robots? Now, again, there's the high rate of unemployment. With this high rate of unemployment, do you think now that this is the right time for Nigeria again to go and get in robots that will make more people to lose their jobs? Bearing in mind that with high rate of employment comes increase in crime in Nigeria, in which the food industry will not be left out. Also, there's the issue of education. If we have to go robotics, do we have the required skill? Obviously, there's going to be a need for upgrading skill. Do we have that required skill? Do we have the right institutions in Nigeria for that? The existing institutions, are they adequately equipped and funded? And even do we have lecturers trained to deploy such training in Nigeria? And talk about basic infrastructure. Number one on the list is constant electricity. Do we have that? Good and adequate water supply? Is it good roads and other means of transportation? Now, with all these points I have put before you, I am asking us, do you think Nigeria is ready? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I want to thank all of you. And now we are going to set the ball rolling for question and answer in the next 20 minutes before we have a closing remark by the president and close for today. So you can stop sharing. And
I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have mic back? Prof?
Anyone that want to ask question, raise hand, then we can take it. We're also seeing questions in the chat, so Prof, you can follow the chat for questions, so that we can see it.
Already, somebody in the chat, somebody is asking about would robotics not cause
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was muted. So.
Sorry, Prof.
And then can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. We can see you.
Thank you, sir. So yeah. So what was the question?
The question is on robotics. That do you think we will not cause hardship for unemployment in developing countries?
The straight answer is there is no one answer to that. When you talk about artificial intelligence, there are different types of technologies, different levels of technologies, and it's difficult to say one will do exactly this or not. So my straight answer to that is if applied well, artificial intelligence should not necessarily interfere with employment. In fact, it can actually enhance labor. It can enhance the capacity of the processing plants to do more than they are doing. And I can give you an example if I have time. We are developing a technology right now for assessing quality of meat in different meat processing facilities. Now, traditionally, the way it's done in Canada here, and I think all over the world, would be that the processors would evaluate quality of their cuts or their product manually. And we have developed a technology that they can use to do this. So when you have a work that you would take about 8 people to do in a processing facility, and you give them a tool, they can do more. They can do more work, more assessment, and also too, they can be trained to move on to higher quality operations. There is one, sometimes people think about just doing low quality labor work. I don't think that that is where we want to be as a country. We want to upgrade people to a higher quality work. So, and it is, the research has shown that when technology is employed, then they can do more, and the quality and the remunerations of those jobs can be much more significant.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Okorua. Okorua?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Yeah, you can.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I want to, quick one. Well, Professor Ngadi and Blessed, thank you very much for those presentations. My take is that, yes, I 100% agree with the propositions that are made. And I want to ask, how do you see the food science and technology profession adapting to this for the nearest future? Because our students are in our campuses now. How do we prepare them to be ready for the next revolution using AI and robotics? And especially when it concerns the soft skills. They will be doing more of technical. How do we align with the soft skills to be able to also deliver on this in Nigeria? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is a very good question. And to answer that, I would refer to our tradition, our culture, and as you know, I'm also one of your own, though I've been out of Nigeria for more than 30 years now. But certainly I still understand now. We know in Nigeria that we invest in the young generation, the future generation. So certainly, if you have colleagues like me or older professors that may not necessarily be as familiar in some of these new technologies, I don't think that is a bad thing necessarily, because you can still invest. You can still say, as a group, that we have played our game, but we are ready to and interested in investing in the future generation, in young professionals. And then also too, I think it requires the will. If people are willing to invest in future generation, and of course I know that Sani has a lot of people that he is mentoring and so on, which I've known that for years. So it's not necessary that a professor should know everything. I think that's probably where we get it wrong, where we feel that a professor should be a know-it-all. When I was a younger researcher, I used to write Fortran. I used to write all kinds of computer programs. I used MS-DOS when I was, but now when I tell my students that we were writing programs in basic basic software, and nobody uses it now. And I have students that I encourage to learn and to investigate. And of course, with experience, I can still supervise them. But the thing is, just interested in the younger generations. I think that's what Nigeria needs to do. Let's invest in the younger generation, so that even if this generation doesn't do it, then we can know for sure that next generation will do it. Because the current senior professors will retire. There's no doubt about that. And move on. And retirement is not a bad thing. But investing in the next generation, so that 10 years from now, we would have people from Nigeria that are capable of taking on leadership in this area worldwide. I think that is important. And I propose that. I mean, of course, I count myself to be privileged to have been in a place where I could do this. But not necessarily every professor has that. And that's, again, not a bad thing. So I think that Nigerian professors, the senior cadre, are already endowed, and they can do what they can, but in terms of the newer technologies, they can at least agree to invest in the new and upcoming generations.
Yes,
I think that's the
yes.
way to go.
Yeah, thank you. That's right.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, I think my mic has been on mute. So I would like to quickly appreciate you for a wonderful webinar and a blessing as well. Please, I want to ask this question. A lot of things have been said, a lot of intellectual engagement. What can we begin to do as individuals in our own little capacity? Especially in Africa, we believe that government should do everything. There is little, and if we wait for government, there is that is going to be done. So in our own little capacity, until we wait for all this big robotic, but as individuals, as scientists, and so maybe in our own little capacity, what do you suggest we can start to do at least one step at a time before we get to that big stage of looking into robotic, AI, and stuff like that? So what are the little suggestions that you can give? Thank you.
Thank you, Akin. Very straightforward. Take ownership of your learning. And now, of course, I think there are well-known challenges in Nigeria in terms of the learning environment. I think we need to recognize that it is not easy. Where universities are closed, the facilities are not there. We can think of government, we can think of all kinds of things. And then also the curriculum may not necessarily be adapted. So those challenges are there and we need to recognize those. But nonetheless, we cannot run away from our ability to take ownership of our learning. And Nigerians worldwide are known for that, by the way. I think that is something that perhaps Nigerians have been blessed with, that you can take ownership and of your learning and then move in that direction. Now, this is actually a good time to learn. This is actually a good time to move into new areas, both for young and old. And the reason I said this is that there are all kinds of free online courses available. McGill, my university, has some free online courses. MIT has some free online courses. Princeton University, some of the Ivy League universities. I have actually seen some people that have taken courses and even up to certificate level by going through online courses. You can learn about machine vision online. You can learn about programming online, but you need to take ownership. Now, that's not easy, but doable. It is doable. And I would encourage individuals to do that. But also, too, I would encourage departments, the Department of Food Science and Technologies across Nigeria, to think seriously about revamping the curriculum. We cannot continue to have an old and outdated curriculum and hope to achieve greatness in terms of training. You cannot really go far with really old curriculum. So there is need to revamp the curriculum. There is need to look at what we provide. Universities need to think about facilities. I cannot understand why universities cannot make a pledge to provide basic facilities for universities. There is no reason for that. The university vice chancellors, university administrators, why is it that there cannot be light, simple light in labs or in offices 24/7? The technology is there and it's really not expensive. It's really not expensive to do. But it's just that there is lack of will to do that in the leadership, and that is unfortunate. But we as professionals have to begin to demand for better. We can do better. You as a person, I as a person need to demand of myself that I can do better. And then you, the students, need to demand more. The professors need to demand more of the universities. And hopefully the universities administrators need to demand more to at least agree on basic principles. I say that if we are in a university, we need to have functional labs or functional curriculum. That doesn't necessarily take a lot of money to do, by the way. So I think when we get so complacent and accept things as they are, then that's a tragedy. That's really unfortunate. But when we begin to demand more of ourselves and demand more of our society and demand more of our government, hopefully we will begin to see changes. It is not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Buki.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, your question. Then after you, I will call Inkem. Then we'll close the questioning section.
Good afternoon, everybody in the house. Good afternoon, Prof. I'm not disappointed about your presentation. You always give it to us full in food science as it NIFST as a body. Most of my question will have gone to the higher institutions of learning. And thank God my prof, Professor Sonny, is there. I think we need to look at our curriculum, our humble course, food science and technology curriculum, how it's going to be functional in all our institutions. Prof has said a little about that, but I think our higher institutions of learning need to come in, invite some form of curriculum that is going to help people that are going. Because at this age, at a particular age, there is a limit to what you can do. They say when the foundation is bad, what will become the whole issue at the end of the day. We need to invite all this from the scratch for the courses that we are doing. When we are in school, we don't know much about this. I've read a lot online about this and the kind of self-development. But how far can we go? It's not something that is sustainable for SMEs. Most of these things are expensive. I work in a manufacturing company, and when you hear, when you learn about the cost of a particular, functional machineries or instruments, you take a step back before you can say you want to go for it. I think our profs that are very close to the government can help us talk to the government about this. Thank you very much. It is a webinar worth of listening to. We appreciate you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Inkem.
Okay. Again, this is Inkem here. Thanks. Special thanks to the leadership of NIFST for putting together these virtual sessions, and Prof. Ngadi and Blessing. Great presentation. Much appreciated. Now, I think the second to the last question, person that asked some questions, and what Prof responded to actually address some of the things I wanted to say, and I think Buki also re-emphasized that. Having said that, and without being repetitive, the fact is that artificial intelligence is driving the world of industry and the world of commerce. And so AI and robotics are already on us. The onus lies on us as the world of academia and industry from a technical capability standpoint to rise up to the challenge. There will always be up and downsides to such innovation. But if we don't rise up to the challenge, if you don't rise up to the challenge and be in tandem with the curve, even if you cannot be ahead of the curve, we are going to lose out, in the now. As a matter of fact, there's no way the Nigerian industries can remain competitive in the global space, if you don't go the route of robotics. If you look at the entire manufacturing across the value chain, it's all about robotics, it's all about artificial intelligence. So as an ecosystem of academia, as an ecosystem comprising, that includes also the companies, and also as individuals, both young and old, we really need to come together, hold hands, and hunker down to be up to speed when it comes to the world of technology, because that is on us already. So if we straddle across what we are doing to our curriculum, and also again on the individuals concerned, both young and old, as I said earlier, because we really need to have that appetite to grow in grow our capabilities in the technical and supply chain space so that we can remain relevant. Otherwise, we cannot compete. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so I think on this
Prof. Professor,
yeah.
Sir, can I kindly take this Oluwatoyin's question to Blessing? It's very, it
okay,
has to do
that,
with it.
Yes, we have 7 minutes to close.
Yes, that Oluwatoyin is asking Blessing that she mentioned that for Nigeria to be able to embrace robotics, we need to upgrade and review our curriculum. So Oluwatoyin wants to know an example of the skill that Blessing will suggest to be incorporated into our institutional curriculum, and at what level, whether at postgraduate or undergraduate level. I think Blessing can address that.
Hello, Blessing. Blessing. We lost her.
Okay.
Hello, Blessing.
Okay, I've been on mute. Okay, yes. I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, go on.
All right, so my answer to that question is we start from the very beginning. We should begin to introduce technology, ICT, into our educational system from the kindergarten stage, which is already happening in some sectors, and that's for the privileged kids. So we have to start infusing ICT into our educational system, and then for the higher institutions as well. And I think that universities that teach food science and technology can take the lead, because like my Oga in Coke, Mr. Nkim just said now, this is the way to go. For the food industry, it is the way to go. It's not too late, and we have able professors, Professor Sonny, all our able professors in NIFST. So I think we can start from where we are. It's never too late, from the kindergarten at the higher institutions. Thank you.
Okay, I think on this note, I want to, on behalf of every one of us, thank the speakers, and I want to invite the President for his closing remark. Mr. President.
Adebukola Omidiran, please stop sharing your screen.
The President. Is the President around?
Mr. President.
I hope we have not lost him.
He should unmute himself. He's still here.
I tried, but it says you have to unmute me. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. I just very quickly want to say a very big thank you to our presenters. The Institute, on behalf of all our members, our EXCO and the Council, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Professor Ngadi for a very short notice coming in to give us this presentation, and the same for Blessing. I also want to thank the entire membership for being part of this webinar, and our friends all over the country who might have joined. I like to say that this is something we thought we could use to fill in the gap. But personally, the satisfaction from this webinar is it's so much, it's so wide that one cannot be hard to say let COVID continue so that the webinar can continue. But I want to say, I want to say that this is a very, very big up to the occasion. Like this is the second episode of our webinar. And I was very moved when Prof was concluding, and it gave us these areas and things that we need to do as an institute, as professionals, to help move the food industry forward. I want to assure Professor Ngadi that we're going to take very good notice for these conclusions that you have given us. And we are going to put it in a way that will not only bring NIFST up to that level or give NIFST that necessary recognition, but also we move the food industry, both nationally and globally, forward. It's not every time that you get to hear this kind of presentations. And I would also like to encourage our professors, especially, because so many people have brought up this issue of curriculum. And I'm sure we will all agree that we have gotten to that level and that stage when we need to take a critical look at our curriculum. There was a couple of weeks ago, there was a very robust discussion on our Body of Fellows platform. And this issue indirectly was being discussed. I think we need to we need to move forward by looking for and suggesting and ensuring that our curriculum is in tune, is in line with where the world is going. Once again, I want to thank everybody that has been a part of this webinar. And I want to assure you that very shortly, you'll be hearing from us for the third episode. And I want to encourage you to link in, to join us. And also, please do not hesitate. If you have suggestions, you have our numbers, you have our emails, please feel free. As a NIFSTer, feel free to share your ideas and your opinion with us. Thank you very much for coming, and God bless all of us.
Dola?
Yes, Prof.
So I think I want to close the webinar, and we have noted the issue of curriculum, which the president has said the council will look at. Our charter as an institute is also an opportunity for us to convoke a national consortium that will look at our curriculum, drawn lessons from colleagues from the North, Canada, America, and Europe, and also some colleagues from the South, the Brazilian colleagues, Indian colleagues. There are one or two things that we need to just put in, and we'll be able to modify it. And I've noted the issue of furnishing our university laboratories or pilot plants in the universities, and it's a very strong point that Prof. Ngadi also spent some time on. And lastly is, he kept on saying, take ownership. Take ownership. The youth need to take ownership. All of us need to be computer literate. We need to be smart in our deliveries. And that is the vote if we want to be competitive in the world. So finally, I thank every one of us for the opportunity, and I hereby close this.
Before you finally close, Prof, just a mention.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the proceedings of this conference shall be forwarded to all registered emails at this conference in the coming days. And also, we implore every participant to be looking for, especially the younger generation, to be looking forward to the next set of issues that will be raised here that is in tandem with what the suggestions have been given. We are talking about the future of work. A lot of topics that will ginger you up on the direction to go in your career in terms of advancement in artificial intelligence will be on air. Please look out for our notification. Thank you. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye to everybody. Prof. Ngadi, we thank you. May God continue to be with all of us. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, sir.